My hand shook as I opened my banking app, not because I was broke, but because I was about to end everything. Across the room, my family laughed at me. My uncle whispered, "Beggar," under his breath. My father smirked. My mother wouldn't even look at me. They thought I was nothing. They thought I came empty-handed. What they didn't know was this: every light in that hall, every chair they sat on, every glass they drank from, belonged to me. And with one move, I could take it all back. Betrayal has a price. They were about to pay it. The invitation arrived late, folded thin with obligation rather than excitement. No call, no follow-up, just my name typed at the bottom like an afterthought. By the time I walked into the venue, the celebration was already alive, music humming, glasses clinking, laughter spilling across the marble floor. It was beautiful. Carefully curated. And somehow, I felt completely out of place inside it. My family moved through the room like they owned it. My father stood near the stage, shaking hands, his smile wide and practiced. My mother hovered near the center, adjusting decorations and offering opinions no one asked for. My cousins laughed in small clusters, dressed like they belonged to something important. No one rushed toward me. No one waved. I slipped inside unnoticed, the way I always had. When my father finally saw me, his smile paused for half a second before returning, thinner this time. He nodded once, not in greeting, but in acknowledgement, like he'd spotted a stranger he vaguely recognized. My mother glanced over, her eyes skimming past me as if confirming I hadn't caused a problem yet. That was the extent of my welcome. I took a seat near the back, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid conversation. The room shimmered with money and effort. Tall centerpieces. Soft lighting. Waiters moving in perfect rhythm. It was the kind of event meant to impress, meant to say we've made it. And judging by the way my family carried themselves, they believed every bit of it. I watched them celebrate something I was technically part of but emotionally excluded from. Their joy didn't include me. Their pride didn't require me. I was present, but not invited into the moment. As the music swelled and applause echoed, I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. This wasn't new. It was just louder. More public. A reminder that in this family, I was tolerated, not valued. They didn't know it yet, but the celebration they were so proud of was balanced on something fragile. And I was the only one who could feel it starting to crack. That I and my family, success had a very specific shape. It was loud, visible, and easy to brag about. Titles mattered more than stability. Appearances mattered more than peace. And if you didn't fit the picture, you were quietly pushed to the edges. I never did. While my cousins chased attention, I chased silence. I left early, worked jobs no one found impressive, and avoided family gatherings that felt more like performances than connection. To them, disappearing meant failing. They never asked where I went. They just assumed I had nothing worth mentioning. My father made it worse. He believed struggle was a character flaw. If you weren't winning publicly, you were losing entirely. Every conversation with him turned into a comparison. Someone else's promotion. Someone else's car. Someone else's wedding. I learned quickly that defending myself only gave him more material. My mother played a different role. She smoothed things over without fixing them. When insults came, she stayed quiet. When jokes landed too hard, she changed the subject. Her silence trained everyone else to keep going. If she didn't stop it, why should they? Eventually, the label stuck. The one they never said directly until that night. The idea that I needed help. That I depended on them. That I showed up empty-handed because that's all I ever had to offer. They didn't see the long hours. The calculated risks. The decisions that didn't look impressive yet. They only saw what I wasn't showing, and they filled the gaps with their own assumptions. So when I walked into that celebration, they didn't see a guest. They saw a reminder of what they believed I'd failed to become. And in their minds, that made me smaller than the room I was standing in. They had no idea how wrong they were. It happened when the room was at its loudest, when laughter covered cruelty and music blurred intention. My uncle leaned toward my father, close enough that he thought I couldn't hear. He was wrong. So he actually showed up, he said, voice low but sharp. Did he come to eat, or to ask for help? He laughed, the kind of laugh meant to invite agreement. My father didn't stop him. He smirked. A few heads turned. A few smiles tightened. No one objected. The insult hovered in the air long enough to be acknowledged, then accepted. I felt it land, heavy and public. Not because it was new, but because this time, it was said out loud. My cousin added quietly, at least the food's free for him. More laughter. Softer, but still there. I stared at the tablecloth, tracing the weave with my eyes, waiting for the moment to pass. It didn't. I stood up to leave, hoping distance would diffuse it. That's when my uncle said it clearly, deliberately, with a grin meant to entertain. Relax. Don't get offended. We know you don't have much. You're basically a beggar compared to the rest of us. The word cut through the music. Beggar. Simple. Final. No joke left to hide behind. The room shifted. Someone coughed. Someone looked away. My mother's eyes flicked toward me for half a second, then dropped to the floor. My chest tightened, not with rage, but with disbelief. This wasn't whispered. It wasn't private. It was a declaration. A label they felt comfortable assigning because they were sure I couldn't challenge it. I nodded slowly, as if accepting the role they'd written for me. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't raise my voice. I simply sat back down. Because in that moment, something inside me went quiet. The part that hoped they'd change. The part that waited for fairness. They thought they'd embarrassed me. What they really did was give me permission. I didn't look at my uncle after that. I looked at my mother. I always did. Somewhere deep down, I still believed she would step in when things went too far. That belief had survived longer than it deserved to. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the stage like nothing had happened. Not angry. Not shocked. Just absent. Her silence was practiced, almost elegant, the kind that smooths over damage without ever acknowledging it. That was the moment the insult stopped being about my uncle. His words were ugly, but predictable. Her quiet was something else. It told everyone in the room that what was said didn't need correcting. That I didn't need defending. That this was acceptable. I remembered every time she'd asked me to let it go for the sake of peace. Every time she'd told me not to make things awkward. Peace, in our family, always meant my discomfort. And watching her choose it again, publicly, finally made that clear. My heart pounded against my chest, not with anger, but with grief. The kind that comes when you realize you've been protecting someone who was never protecting you back. I wasn't expecting her to argue. I was expecting acknowledgement. A look. A word. Anything. Nothing came. Around us, the celebration continued. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loudly. The band started another song. Life moved on as if I hadn't been reduced to a joke moments earlier. I sat there, invisible in plain sight, feeling something shift inside me. Not heartbreak. Resolve. Because silence isn't neutral. It takes a side. And in that moment, my mother chose hers. I stopped waiting for someone to save me from my family. I stopped hoping they'd see me differently. If I was alone in that room, then I'd act like it. And I'd protect myself the way no one else ever had. What hurt most about their laughter wasn't the insult itself, it was the confidence behind it. They were so sure they understood my life. So certain that what they saw was all there was. They mistook my silence for emptiness, my distance for failure. What they never noticed were the years I worked without announcing it. The contracts signed quietly. The risks taken when no one was watching. I learned early that explaining myself to people who'd already decided my worth was a waste of energy. So I stopped. While they measured success in applause, I measured it in ownership. While they chased titles, I chased control. I didn't need to look rich. I needed to be untouchable. And that kind of progress doesn't come with updates or bragging rights. There were nights I slept in my office. Weeks where I spoke to no one except numbers on a screen. I made mistakes, fixed them, and moved on without telling a soul. Every setback became a lesson, every lesson became leverage. They didn't know about the company I built under a different name. The investments that paid slowly but steadily. The decisions that looked boring until they weren't. To them, if it didn't shine, it didn't count. I glanced around the hall again, watching them celebrate in comfort. Expensive lighting. Perfect timing. Everything working exactly as it should. They believed this night existed because of their planning, their status, their influence. What they didn't know was that I'd touched every piece of this event long before I walked into it. Not as a guest, but as a name on the paperwork. A signature at the bottom of contracts they'd never seen. I sat there calmly, letting the insult settle. Letting the moment stretch. Because revealing the truth too early would have been a waste. Power doesn't announce itself. It waits. The deal happened quietly, years before that night, when no one in my family was paying attention to me at all. I had just come out of a failed partnership and a lesson that cost more than money. I didn't want recognition anymore. I wanted position. A friend of mine worked in event infrastructure. Venues, logistics, contracts, everything people take for granted when a celebration runs smoothly. He told me how fragile most events really were. How one owner, one signature, could control the entire experience without ever being seen. I listened. Then I invested. Not in one hall, but in the holding company that managed several of them. Equipment. Staffing. Vendor relationships. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with a plaque or a headline. But it came with leverage. Over time, I bought more. Quietly. Methodically. I never rushed. I never announced it. The returns were steady, the control absolute. Eventually, certain events couldn't happen without my approval. Certain lights wouldn't turn on. Certain doors wouldn't open. When my cousin announced the celebration months earlier, I recognized the venue immediately. Same management group. Same systems. Same contracts I'd reviewed dozens of times. I smiled to myself and said nothing. I didn't intervene. I didn't offer help. I let them plan freely, confident, proud. I watched them sign agreements they didn't fully understand. Agreements that included my name in places they'd never think to look. That night, as I sat among them being called a beggar, the irony was almost painful. Every detail they admired, the timing, the service, the atmosphere, existed because of a decision I'd made years ago when no one thought I mattered. I didn't come to the celebration to reveal that truth. Not at first. I came to see how far their contempt would go when they believed they held all the power. They had no idea the foundation beneath their celebration already belonged to me. Once the speeches began, the room relaxed into confidence. My family leaned back in their chairs, smiling like hosts instead of guests. They admired the lighting, praised the service, complained lightly about things that didn't matter. Comfort makes people careless. I watched quietly. Waiters moved with precision, refilling glasses before they were empty. The music rose and fell at exactly the right moments. Every detail flowed smoothly, the kind of perfection people assume comes from money alone. In reality, it comes from control. My uncle gestured toward the stage and laughed. "This place wasn't cheap," he said, pride thick in his voice, as if he'd personally earned it. My cousin nodded, already planning how to describe the night later. I kept my expression neutral. Each laugh landed differently now. Not because it hurt less, but because it meant less. I wasn't offended anymore. I was observant. I noticed how entitled they sounded when they believed the world was working for them. How relaxed people become when they think consequences are someone else's problem. I sipped my drink slowly, counting the minutes. Not out of impatience, but precision. I knew exactly when certain confirmations would finalize. Exactly when cancellation clauses would expire. Exactly when my leverage would become absolute. The irony sat heavy and satisfying. They called me a beggar while enjoying resources I quietly owned. They dismissed me while standing on agreements tied to my signature. The contrast was almost elegant. Around us, the celebration reached its peak. Toasts. Applause. Smiles frozen for photos. Everyone assumed the night would only get better from here. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't reclaim attention. Because the most powerful moment isn't the one where you speak. It's the one where the room realizes you were never dependent on them at all. I could have let it end there. Let them celebrate, leave quietly, and never look back. That option existed. It always does. But then my father looked at me, and that choice disappeared. He caught my eye from across the table, his glass raised, smile sharp and knowing. It wasn't warm. It wasn't proud. It was the look he used when he thought he'd won something. When he believed I finally understood my place. He leaned toward my uncle and said something I couldn't hear, but I didn't need to. My uncle laughed and glanced at me again, shaking his head. The smirk returned, shared now, passed between them like a private victory. That look carried years with it. Every comparison. Every dismissal. Every time he'd measured my worth against someone louder, richer, more visible. In that moment, I wasn't his child. I was a cautionary tale. I felt something settle inside me, steady and cold. Not anger. Certainty. The kind that removes hesitation completely. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. I realized then that silence would only confirm what he believed, that I'd accept whatever role they assigned me. Walking away would be interpreted as defeat. Staying quiet would be permission. I set my glass down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the table. A small action, but deliberate. My heart rate didn't change. My hands didn't shake. Because the decision had already been made. I didn't need revenge. I needed correction. A recalibration of reality that couldn't be laughed off or ignored. Something so clear it would end the conversation forever. As the applause rose for another toast, I reached into my pocket and took out my phone. My father was still smiling. He had no idea that in a few minutes, that expression would vanish. The screen lit up in my hand, familiar and steady. I didn't rush. Rushing is what people do when they're emotional. This wasn't that. This was execution. I scrolled past balances and alerts, past numbers that no longer meant survival, only confirmation. Every figure represented a choice I'd made when no one was watching. Late nights. Quiet risks. Patience. The kind of work that doesn't earn applause but builds leverage. Around me, the celebration swelled. Laughter grew louder. Glasses clinked harder. Someone called for another round. The timing couldn't have been better. The higher the confidence, the sharper the fall. I opened the account tied to the holding company. The one linked directly to venue operations. My thumb hovered for a moment, not in doubt, but awareness. Once this happened, there was no rewinding the perception they had of me. Not that I wanted to. I reviewed the authorization list one last time. My name sat at the top, alone. Exactly where it belonged. The contracts were clear. The authority was absolute. Everything they believed about this night rested on an assumption that had never been true. I took a slow breath and confirmed the action. No dramatic sound. No flashing alert. Just a simple confirmation message acknowledging a request had been processed. That was it. Nothing changed immediately in the room. The music didn't stop yet. The lights didn't flicker. That's how real power works. It moves first on paper. The effect follows. I locked the screen and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Calm. Centered. Detached. The decision was already traveling through systems they didn't know existed. Across the table, my father laughed again, relaxed, unaware. My uncle raised his glass for another toast. The band played on, right on schedule. For now. Because what I'd just done wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. It was final. And within minutes, the celebration they were so proud of would start asking questions it couldn't answer that I didn't look around when I made the call. I already knew what I'd see: smiles, comfort, certainty. Instead, I stepped just far enough away that my voice wouldn't carry, keeping my back straight, my expression neutral. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a confirmation. The call connected immediately. The operations manager answered with professional ease, already recognizing my number. I didn't explain the family situation. I didn't need to. Emotion complicates things. Authority doesn't. I'm invoking the ownership clause, I said calmly. Effective immediately. There was a brief pause, not doubt, just process. He asked for verification. I gave it. He confirmed receipt, tone unchanged. Understood, he said. We'll proceed according to protocol. That was it. No raised voices. No threats. No drama. Just a system responding to the person it was designed to answer to. As I ended the call, I felt something release inside my chest. Not satisfaction. Alignment. The kind that comes when your actions finally match the truth of your position. I returned to my seat just as another toast began. Applause rippled across the room. My father stood, smiling broadly, glass raised high. He looked proud. He looked secure. He looked exactly like someone who believed nothing could go wrong. I watched closely now. Not impatiently. Precisely. I knew what would happen next, not the details, but the direction. Systems were already adjusting. Messages already moving. Staff already receiving instructions they couldn't ignore. The celebration continued, blissfully unaware. Music played. Servers moved. Cameras flashed. It all looked intact from the surface. That's the thing about turning points. They rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, slipping into place while everyone else is distracted. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Calm. Present. Certain. Because I knew this. The moment had already passed. They just hadn't felt it yet first, no one noticed. That's how these things begin, not with chaos, but confusion. The band reached the end of a song and paused longer than expected. A few guests clapped anyway, assuming another track would follow. It didn't. The lights dimmed slightly, not enough to alarm, just enough to feel wrong. A server leaned toward the stage, whispering something urgent. Another checked a tablet, frowning. Small movements. Quiet signals. My uncle glanced around, annoyed. "What's taking so long?" he muttered, tapping his glass with a spoon. The sound echoed too loudly without music to soften it. Then the microphone crackled. The host cleared his throat, smile tight. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're just experiencing a brief technical issue," he said. The word brief hung in the air, unconvincing. Whispers spread. Guests shifted in their seats. Phones came out. Someone laughed nervously. The confidence that had filled the room minutes earlier began to leak away. I stayed still. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look around. I already knew what was happening behind the curtain. Authorizations being revoked. Services paused. Protocols engaged. The band stepped off the stage. The lights dimmed again, this time noticeably. A manager appeared, speaking quietly to my father, whose smile began to strain. His posture stiffened as he nodded, once, then again, slower. The music didn't come back. Instead, a hum replaced it. Air conditioning. Footsteps. The real sounds of a room realizing something is wrong. My uncle stood up. "This is ridiculous," he said, louder than necessary. "We paid good money for this." The manager responded calmly, professionally. "I understand, sir. We're addressing the situation." But even from across the room, I could see it. The shift. The moment certainty collapsed into doubt. Because when systems stop responding to you, it doesn't matter how important you think you are. The celebration had reached its limit. And there was no button left to press. Once the silence settled, panic rushed in to fill it. Voices rose, overlapping, sharp with disbelief. Chairs scraped the floor as people stood, searching for answers that weren't coming fast enough. The confidence my family wore earlier dissolved into irritation, then fear. My uncle waved a staff member over, his tone demanding now. "Fix this," he said, as if volume could restore control. The staff member nodded politely, eyes already tired, repeating the same line he'd been instructed to use. "We're working on it." My cousins clustered together, whispering urgently. Phones appeared in their hands, thumbs moving quickly, calling vendors, checking emails, scrolling through contracts they'd never bothered to read before. Confusion turned to accusation. My father's face tightened as he spoke with the venue manager again. This time, his voice wasn't confident. It was clipped. Careful. He kept glancing around, aware that people were watching. Reputation was slipping through his fingers, and he could feel it. Someone said my name. Quietly at first. Then louder. Heads turned in my direction. For the first time that night, they really looked at me. Not as an afterthought. Not as a joke. As a variable. My mother approached slowly, eyes wide, confusion etched into her face. "Do you know what's happening?" she asked, lowering her voice. There was no accusation yet, just the first hint of fear. I met her gaze and said nothing. Around us, frustration grew louder. Guests began checking their watches. The host whispered urgently into his phone. The band waited near the stage, uncertain, unpaid for the moment. The celebration had become a problem. And in that chaos, my family finally understood something had gone wrong in a way money alone couldn't fix. They didn't know the answer yet. But they were getting closer. My father found me near the edge of the room, where the noise thinned and the truth felt closer. His expression had changed completely. The smirk was gone. In its place was something careful, almost respectful. That alone told me how serious the situation had become. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. Not demanding. Not accusing. Asking. I didn't answer immediately. I looked past him at the room he thought he controlled. Guests shifting uncomfortably. Staff waiting for instructions that wouldn't come. A celebration unraveling without explanation. Then I met his eyes. "I own it," I said. He frowned. "Own what?" "All of it," I replied. "The venue management. The equipment. The contracts that make tonight possible." I kept my voice level, almost gentle. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about clarity. He laughed once, short and sharp, the sound of disbelief. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." I pulled out my phone and opened the document folder I'd prepared long ago. Ownership records. Contracts. Authorization clauses. I didn't shove it in his face. I let him look if he wanted to. He did. The color drained from his face as he scrolled. Slowly. Carefully. Every swipe peeling away an assumption he'd built over years. His hands trembled slightly as he handed the phone back. My mother appeared beside him, sensing the shift. "What is it?" she asked. Her voice cracked. "He owns it," my father said quietly. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. Like a language he'd never learned. The room seemed to shrink. My uncle approached, still angry, still loud. "What's going on?" he demanded. I turned to him calmly. "You called me a beggar earlier," I said. "You're standing in a celebration I control." Silence fell fast. Not awkward. Absolute. No one argued. No one laughed. The truth didn't need defending. It stood on its own, heavy and undeniable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I didn't enjoy it. Because this wasn't revenge. It was a correction long overdue. They finally saw me. Not as they wanted to, but as I was. The room never fully recovered. Conversations restarted, but quieter now, strained and uncertain. Laughter felt forced. Smiles didn't last. The celebration limped forward, held together by obligation rather than joy. My uncle avoided my eyes entirely. The man who'd laughed the loudest earlier suddenly found interest in his phone. My cousins kept their distance, whispering in tight circles, recalculating everything they'd said that night. Power shifts do that. They make people review their own words. My father stood apart, shoulders tense, staring at nothing. He didn't approach me again. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't expose how wrong he'd been. Pride doesn't bend easily, especially in public. My mother tried once. She reached out, hand hovering near my arm, then pulled back. Her face held regret, but not apology. The difference mattered. Regret is about discomfort. Apologies are about responsibility. I didn't push for either. I wasn't there to extract remorse. I'd already taken what I needed, truth. The truth that they had underestimated me. The truth that I didn't need their approval. The truth that silence had finally cost them something. The event ended earlier than planned. Guests left confused, murmuring about technical issues and bad timing. No one said what they were really thinking, but everyone felt it. As the room emptied, I stayed seated for a moment, breathing in the quiet. The same space that once made me feel small now felt neutral. Balanced. I stood, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the exit. No one stopped me. No one spoke. That's how power settles in, not with applause, but with understanding. And for the first time, I left a family gathering without carrying their weight with me. Some lessons don't arrive loudly. They don't need shouting, threats, or raised voices. They arrive quietly, settle deep, and stay there. This was one of those lessons. I didn't walk away feeling victorious. I walked away clear. Clear about who I was, what I owned, and what I would never tolerate again. The difference mattered. Victory fades. Clarity lasts. My family learned something that night, even if they never say it out loud. They learned that the version of me they dismissed no longer existed. That silence doesn't mean weakness. That being underestimated can be a position of strength. They also learned that words have weight. Calling someone a beggar doesn't make it true. But it does reveal how comfortable you are standing on assumptions instead of facts. And assumptions collapse fast when reality finally speaks. As for me, I learned that respect isn't something you request repeatedly. It's something you require once. Boundaries don't need speeches. They need enforcement. I didn't cut anyone off. I didn't demand apologies. I simply changed the terms of access to my life. Those who adjusted stayed. Those who didn't drifted away. Both outcomes were acceptable. That celebration faded into memory, but the shift it created didn't. Every future interaction carried a new awareness. A new caution. A new understanding of where the line was drawn. Because power isn't about proving anything. It's about knowing exactly who you are. And never letting anyone convince you otherwise again.